Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. Lucy Kate Barnes grew up on council estates. She went into care at 13 and fell off the care cliff at 16. Aged 18, she studied law at Surrey. She is now a barrister. Alongside her legal career, she set up charity Lawyers Who Care and is a vocal advocate for children's rights and social mobility for disadvantaged young people. Lucy won Diversity Champion of the Year 2025 and is one of the university's UK 100 Faces campaign, celebrating the first in their family to go to university. Lucy has started a Substack, and you can find that at theadvocatewithin.substack.com. Lucy, it is such a pleasure to have you here. One of my favourite things about writing you just personify, which is getting an authentic voice onto the page. And I think best of all, and of why when we first met and I became your writing coach and it became apparent that that was the process you were engaged in, it's just been so exciting to see you name and shame the shame of all of these things and move through it with writing as that tool. So it is lovely to have you here.
Oh, honestly, Rachel, it's been my honour. Thank you so much for inviting me, getting me a little bit teary there. Proudly highly sensitive person, so there we go. But honestly, since having you as my coach, everything is just my self-confidence and my authenticity is only, showing up as me has only grown. So I'm super grateful to you also.
Tell me about going on Woman's Hour.
I'd love to. So actually, I was contacted via my website, which is just my name, lucykatebarnes.co.uk, which is kind of like a portfolio of all the things I've done. And I was contacted out of the blue, and I'm actually really boundaried around media, because a lot of media is like, give me your victim narrative and it will, I think the currency is outrage a lot of the time. There are some incredible journalists, not to send for them, not doing that, but I don't feel comfortable in that space, so I always send with media. I'm very happy to decline them. A lot of people are very much like, get me a profile. I'm not that interested, unless it's how I want to be seen or heard. And Women's Hour reached out, and I very much had my sort of standard boundaries. They said, I've got this piece on like high flying care leavers, we'd like to include you. And I just sort of said, I would absolutely love that, it'd be my honour, but can it be the angle really empowering rather than victim based? And they said, we love that for you, yes, come on, which was really amazing for me to be able to sort of express myself in that way and not feel like, oh, it's a huge opportunity, it's literally BBC Women's Hour, I've got to say yes, and just say, actually, can I show up this way? And when they accepted that, I was delighted. Again, that was very off script. They asked questions and I just sort of spoke from the heart, and I got to express and make people aware of the barriers that care leavers face and the skills of care leavers, which is really central to my messaging. Like, actually, we're bloody amazing in so many ways. We just need the support, we need the opportunities, and that was really lovely. And I couldn't believe the positive reception to it, because I was literally just saying what was on my mind, and it was a really massive and amazing opportunity. And I'm very grateful that they allowed me to just be me, rather than go on there and be like, my life has been oppressive since day one. That may be true, but it doesn't serve me and the narrative I want, young people to see. So,
and that's why you're writing the memoir in exactly that
absolutely.
way.
Yes, exactly. 100%. Like, I don't want to add to the victim consciousness of the planet. I don't want to add to disabling people's sense of agency, and I want to contribute to their sense of, I can do it, not the darkness in the world. We've got enough of that, haven't we?
Yeah. To be honest, it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness.
Love that. Absolutely that. 100%.
Yeah. TEDx. Talk to us about that. How did that happen? What happened?
So actually, that was the start of my self-development journey, because before then I was just living on a script of what my sort of dysfunctional family line did, because I didn't know any different. I had a toolkit that resembled bringing drama and chaos into your life. You gained love by the same sort of, I would call it toxic patterns, that I now call it out as that. But at the time I had no recognition of that. I was just trying to show up in the way that my my nervous system known. So it was familiar to me to act in those patterns. But at the time, I entered a relationship with someone who I really cared about, and he kind of gently made me realize that those patterns weren't healthy. I don't use the term normal because actually to my nervous system, they were very normal. So I use the term unhealthy, and they weren't serving me ultimately. So I had this epiphany almost, where I was like, okay, Lucy, let's get started on that self-development journey, because this isn't serving you anymore. And you know, I thanked my survival brain for saying, this is, you know, all we've known thus far, but I'm taking the reins and I'm going to start this. So the very first book I read, which was weird, it just came up on Amazon almost out of nowhere. And I'm a big believer in like synchronicities, all the signs and all of that. And the first thing I saw was The Drama Triangle, which is crazy because literally that's not a very popular book. The one that I read specifically by Barry and Janae Weinhold. It's a fantastic book. A bit of a plug for them, but they deserve it. And I felt a calling to just read it, because I felt like I brought a lot of drama and chaos into my life very subconsciously. I had no idea how that happened, but well, now I do, but at the time. And I read it and it blew my mind, and it really made me realize, you know, the dynamics that I talk about in my TEDx talk with the persecutor role and the inner persecutor role. So there's the limiting beliefs, the voices in my head from childhood that were very negative, the victim role, which ultimately the whole triangle oscillates, because everyone will say, oh, why would anyone want to be a victim? But as I explain in my TED talk, there are huge short-term payoffs of that role. And I was subconsciously attracted to them. And then the rescuer role is the most fascinating one of all, because everyone thinks, you know, oh, it's a hero they've come to save, but actually that inhibits.
And indeed, oh, I'm being a hero.
Yes,
I'm looking
exactly.
after, I'm
and
saving.
100%. And the ego elements of that are so seductive, and I totally understand why. But sort of reforming the rescuer to a coach, which you embody, Rachel, I have to say, the coach role, and reforming the victim consciousness to the empowerment dynamic, the creator, and then empowering the sort of persecutor to the challenger. Because actually some of the best mentors, they don't just say, yes, everything you're doing is bloody amazing, you know, keep doing it. They will say, I see you and I hear you, but have you thought about doing, what about this? And just planting that seed and letting it grow and germinate in its own time. So that really, really was profound to me as a book. And I wanted to share that with everyone else, because I thought if I've had this massive impact with just this one read, which was so easy to read, you can read it in 3 days. And I was intimidated by like all the kind of philosophical works and all of the big words. And I'm from a council estate background, so all the kind of traditional self-help was a bit inaccessible to me. So
Can we go with that for a second?
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of things in there that I just think are so useful to bring out a little. First of all, big identifying with how much seeing the drama triangle for the first time is that moment of, oh,
yes.
Because certainly for me in my therapeutic and later coaching journey, I absolutely remember coming from that point of where you feel like your unhealthy relationships and your patterns that are not serving you are at some level this beautiful, important thing that nobody else is ever going to understand. And then you realize that the beautiful, important things that nobody else is going to understand, that the things that you can give to the world, are on the other side of the drama. And I remember when my therapist showed me that triangle and seeing how I told myself these stories of me as the goody trying to help the victim. And I could see the pattern of certain victims in my life and how they were relying on having somebody there as a persecutor at that other point of the triangle. And suddenly that realization, but there's another realization that I remember listening to you talk about that, which is and actually a creative writing exercise mainly, which is I get people to write down, I think you've done this in some of the groups, that write down the name of a place that is reassuring, lovely, makes you feel like your best possible self, makes you feel good about things, and somewhere that does the opposite. And one of them that was very, very interesting for me was somebody that I know many years ago now, was that for me, Waterstones Piccadilly, if I walk in there, it's like this space that is so welcoming, and there's a sort of few, I feel really like I'm somewhere I belong. And whereas if I'm somewhere noisy and clubby, I feel scared, all of the sort of imposter syndrome and not being able to lip read
100%.
and dyspraxia and falling over. You know, it's it all, again, snap. But the fact that the reason I bring it up is hearing you say, I grew up in a council estate, and equating it to those books. Now, anybody who looks at you today, listens to you talk, hears how articulate, forthright, present you are in words. They are not going to see from the outside that feeling is there. And I was actually, I kind of smiled about this as well, because, and we will go on to speech writing and we will talk about writing and the process in a minute. But when you were on Colin Flynn's podcast and he said, where are you from? And you said Essex, and giggled slightly. He said, what's that about? And you said something along the lines of, oh, there's so much prejudice around that. And he said, be proud of it. And you said, I am proud of it. And it's so interesting that we can have this cognitive dissonance. We can be proud of something, but also self-conscious or embarrassed or unresolved. And it's not about resolving these things. It's about knowing that everyone is, and we can 100%. Take that forward.
Yeah, 100%. And like another sort of battle in my sort of life has been perfectionism. And actually, it's okay to show up where you are now. Like even some of the stuff from the TED Talk, you know, I've come a long way since then. And I feel like I went a bit Australian then. My son's been watching way too much Steve Irwin.
It's contagious.
Yeah.
You've caught Steve.
I've caught it. And that's okay too. Like no one is, you know, showing up, I've found as trying to be the final product isn't healthy, because I don't want people to think, oh, well, Lucy's always the coach then, and Lucy's always the creator or always the challenger. And that's not true either. Like it depends on context. It depends on environment. And yeah, I'm super proud to be from Essex. And I also remind myself of my roots on a regular basis, because that is important to me. So at that time in my life when I had huge imposter syndrome, I still do, but it takes a different face. The more I grow, it morphs slightly. But back then I had a bit of an insecurity, because those in my law school were not all, but there was a high proportion, particularly I lived in Surrey, that were from private school. They were from different backgrounds to me. People were different. And at that part of my life, when I first got into the drama triangle, it was very much like, I'm different and that's negative, or I'm not as far ahead. And I remember those limiting beliefs or that inner persecutor. And I remember them shouting at me so loudly. So that was a whole journey for me at that period of time. And as it is now, it's just changed a different face.
Can I go into an example of that? So it's 2018, you're performing your TEDx talk. Can you talk to us about how you went from reading this stuff we've been talking about to writing, making your notes, knowing that was going to happen? What was that like as a speechwriter at that stage?
So honestly, this will make you laugh, but the audition, I just saw a poster and I thought maybe I'll share this idea. And everyone rocked up super polished. I rocked up in my trackies and I just spoke from the heart. And then I was honestly shook to my core when they emailed me saying I'd been selected, because I felt like, because I only saw it the day, I think it was like the day before the auditions were. So I didn't have, and that sometimes helps me as a neurodivergent person. Like I thrive under pressure. If I'd had 3 months to prepare, I'd have overthought it. I'd have been way too polished.
So you learned something from that. You learned some self-acceptance, self-knowledge from over planning is not helpful to me. What happened next? What happened next?
In terms of preparing and planning the speech, I wanted to have elements of it that were freestyled, because I love TED Talks, but I don't like ones that are way too polished, and I wanted to be me, and I'm me most when I've got a list of bullet points and I've thought about the topic and prepared to such a degree that I know that the stuff that generally comes out of my mouth will be okay. That's my process, because if I write a script, I come across as someone completely different. And I've had this in my advocacy journey as well. When I first started out, it was like, I've got to pretend I'm this posh barrister woman, and I've got to pronounce all of my T's, and I had to script it because I felt I didn't belong as me. Whereas
and this is something, isn't it? In our work lives, law potentially particularly, but in most of our work lives, moving from I'm meant to look like a proper insert thing I am to realizing I am that thing.
100%.
And even if not everybody out there is showing that they have imposter syndrome too, actually we all feel like we're pretending, and the outside world can see that we're not. So I'm interested, is there some overlap in your experience from having the sort of bullet points in your head, the main points to talk about that you do know, and the more often you do it, the more you know those bullet points. Turning up for your TEDx talk or turning up as an advocate, was the process similar?
Yeah, because I think I very much prepare in my mind so much. Like I talk to myself. I prepare my speeches in the shower.
Yeah, we talked about this beforehand, didn't we?
Thing. Yes. Yeah, my husband loves it because he just hears me like talking away in the shower. And I'm constantly preparing so that, I don't have to script things, because that's not a comfortable process for me. And it's the same with my advocacy journey. I have to know the law back to front, and I have to know what's, my case facts back to front, but I can't write it all down because I will lose cadence, I will lose the rhythm, I will lose bouts of authenticity. And obviously it's all thinking on your feet anyway. A judge could ask you a really complicated question and you've not got that on a script. So if you've got that, it freaks you out. So speaking for me has always been, it's a really interesting relationship that I have with it, because growing up, I was always kind of different because I love to talk. I've always been attracted to being an orator. I love talking. And as a child, that was like, oh, shut up, Lucy, you're too chatty, you're too this, you're too that, you're too dramatic, you're too all of these labels that then in my sort of self-love journey, I've come to realize is that was dulling my light. And actually talking has always been something I enjoy doing. So it's just been about perfecting the craft. But in an audience setting, it's like a relationship. So I don't see it as a speech. I see it as a conversation with the audience. And I love eye contact. I love having that, detecting what audience I've got and having them be emboldened by that experience. It's a whole immersive experience.
And it's interesting how the coaching and actually psychotherapy comes so directly into audience relationship. I've always found that you've got that sense of know all of the skills, know all of the tools, but abandon them in the face of the human soul in front of you, the young idea.
Yes, I love that.
And I remember the first time I was going to run a drama group and standing on the side of the primary school assembly and all these, expressionless children sitting there like that, staring at you, and the teachers around the outside looking like actual adults. Well, I was 20 something and didn't really feel like I was much older than the little kids sitting there. And I remember the process of walking onto that stage and the realization landing in my head, just because that's what it feels like in here doesn't mean it's what's true out there. And I remember looking them all in the eyes and going, who knows what drama is, and meaning it. And everyone suddenly going, oh, me. And then suddenly we're having this lovely conversation about something that I am interested in. And I've left behind the scared, self-conscious narrator, and I am in the moment. So when you talk about authenticity coming from knowing the material rather than scripting the material, I absolutely get that. How are you finding that works for you?
Well, this is where your coaching has been so important to me. Like I went out and I don't just want, because people say, oh, your story is so inspiring. Like I don't want that, right? With my writing, I want it to speak to people. Like I want it to resonate. And so in my journey, it's not about just sharing my story, because there are other elements that reveal about society. It reveals about human nature at its core. I wanted to be a persuasive writer and hone that craft authentically. And that's where it's been in my coaching journey. So important, because you remind me of who I am. It's so easy in writing and in speaking to get carried away with what other people are doing. Or, you read a book and you think, God, this is written so bloody beautifully. And I don't talk like that. My analogies aren't like that. You get into your head and you've just been like, right, what comes to your mind basically, and write that. and that core voice is how I've applied that to my Substack. So other than amending typos or grammatical stuff, my Substack is just what comes to my mind. And it's like what Tupac said. I'm going to be really authentic here because I quote hip hop all the time. That's very on brand for me. And he said, when I rhyme, I go blind and I let the Lord do his thing. So it's kind of like you're in the moment, just like you said, and it does speak to you through that. So you've helped me kind of do that rather than start doing that, get in my head, and then start doing something else because I think that's what I should be doing.
Can I just join you on that? Because something that you said that I pushed back against recently, and I'm so glad I did, was you said something like, when I'm writing my Substack, it can just come out of my head. Whereas writing is something a bit different to that. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't say that all of the alarms were going off in my head. What I said was, oh, really? That's interesting. Is it possible that can be what the writing feels like all the time? And Absolutely. It's exactly that we so regularly will find new examples in our heads of walls that we don't know we've put up ourselves between what's real writing and what is us transporting our personality into words, which is writing.
100%.
And the difference has been so great, because actually what I found very interesting was, as soon as we'd had that conversation, or very soon after it, you wrote that piece on shame and the things in your past that you said, I don't want to in any way be carrying the sense that anyone will think I'm trying to be the perfect victim. It's the reverse of that. I'm a full person, the victim mentality, what that can do. And you let that out. And before we have our interview, I went back and watched some of the videos again. And you do bring up what you were not proud of in your TED Talk, in your TEDx talk. You say, these are the ways I behaved. This is where I now see it came from. This is the pattern I am now able to be on the lookout for. It wasn't that I'd nudged you into something that you hadn't come to on your own. It's more of a reminder. And I do see that we actually kind of already know what the ingredients are that we want to get there. Yes. But we need those reminders. We need to keep coming back with, it is okay. And in fact, it's more than okay. It is the target to be your full self, because nobody is interested in perfection. No. They are interested in the uniqueness that comes with authenticity, which is actually especially the flaws. The minute your flaws are out there, people are reassured by it, because then they can 100%. Stop perfectionizing.
No, 100%. I think what happened actually, interestingly, from that journey from the TED Talk in 2018 to where we are now, that the actual pressure of when I started to become this care experienced role model, and the burden of being a role model made me overthink, because I started getting in my head, and it was 2023 or maybe a bit before that, I started to take ownership of my care experience, because before, for foster care children, unfortunately, there is a stigma that we carry. I was told in one work experience placement, effectively, when I told them, they asked me classic law question, what do your parents do? And I awkwardly had to be like, I don't really have parents, actually. I'm from a foster care background. And it was just such an air of pity. I could sense it. I could feel people's emotions. I was like, I know he's pitying me. And then he basically returned and said, have you thought about a different career path? And so that was a really big moment for me, and realizing I don't talk about that. And then I took ownership of that with a Twitter post, and that went crazily, that went viral. And that was kind of the pioneering of my sort of care experience journey, the championing of lawyers who care, creating lawyers who care, which has now successfully mentored over 77 care leavers, which is just huge.
Can I get you to say what the post said, please?
But it said, basically at 13, I was put into care. 16, I was kicked out of care. But then I was explaining that I got pupillage. And then I said, but I'm proud of all of that, because it's what created the advocate within me. Hence my Substack, the advocate. That blew up. That went absolutely massive. And that was after you'd heard from this, insert word I could be thinking right now for that person who said that to you. It was after you'd heard that from him. That was a long time before, but I carried the weight of that stigmatization for a long time. So that was when I was 18 years old, or 19 years old. I was starting out my legal journey. I was at uni. I had some work experience, and it was on a work experience placement. And that made me feel like I can't talk about being a care leaver here. I can't talk about being from the ends here. I can't talk about that. It's a different language. It's an ecosystem law. It's a completely different thing. And there are codes that are unwritten, by the way, but I then had to learn them myself and teach them myself, or I wouldn't fit in. When I made that Twitter post years later, that was me saying, actually, not only am I saying I don't necessarily want to fit in with that, but perhaps by me being myself, I can invite belonging in others. And that gave me a heck of a lot of purpose.
Yeah.
And that's what Lawyers Who Care has really beautifully done. It's fostered a sense of belonging in the legal profession to those like me, care leavers who and those from lower economic backgrounds who didn't have that sense before. So that's been a really lovely byproduct of the mentoring we offer.
And I hope that you're saying that to yourself, that inviting belonging is absolutely what the mission is.
Yes,
isn't
it's 100% the mission. And to have people say, do you know what, actually, I am not ashamed of who I am, and I'm bloody proud of it. And to be able to then hold that space rather than allowing those other voices creep in, whether it's the voice of propaganda from childhood, negative parental voices, the voices of society, social workers, whomever it may be, you know, having those positive voices in your head to counteract that and like have a mini debate or a little mini court session in your mind to be able to counter it. And I think that's been really profound. But something that did happen with all of that momentum in being a role model in the care experience community is then I felt, okay, I've got to do everything perfectly now. And I went back into that space, which is why it's been a really interesting journey, because now I'm coming out of that. And I can't remember who said it to me. One of my friends said it to me because I didn't feel like I could be 100% authentic. I was like proud of my journey, but I couldn't be like, yeah, and also everyone, I've done some stuff I'm not proud of as well. Do you know what I mean? Because I felt then I wouldn't be a role model, because I felt like I had to be the perfect victim, which I'm now working against and saying, actually, that, and my friend said, that makes you more of a role model to young people, particularly your target demographic, because they're probably grappling with the same, why am I like this mentality that you had.
And also something else that you give people when you do that is it stops being about, why am I like this? And it starts being, what do I want to be like?
Absolutely.
You know, it stops being, I have to find some cosmic answer and sit with only that, which some people mistake therapy for being about. It's not just coaching as well. It's not just coaching, particularly is what do I want to do next orientated, but both of them are just so all about, what do I want to do with the knowledge? What do I want to do with the experience? And where am I going next? And, you know, that is where the role model thing comes in, is that, you know, perfection is no use to anybody. If they think they have to be a perfect anything in order for the next chapter to be exciting, they're going to read another book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. No. And I just want young people to say, do you know what? I have messed up and actually I can make it better. At the same time, those things exist together.
And I feel like what I'm responding to in that is the it's not too late, because however old we are, and I have 60-year-olds saying, I'm too old for it. I have 80-year-olds saying, I'm too old for it. But I also have 9 and 20-year-olds saying, I'm too old for it. And our brains will do this, that if anything worthwhile is going to happen, it will have happened by now. And it's just one of the most toxic misunderstandings of identity.
Absolutely agreed. No, 100%. It's literally never too late. I know I've said it to you before, Rachel, but I love the quote of Alan Watts where he said, you are under no obligation to be who you were 5 minutes ago. And I believe that. And I'm still learning on that. Now, I'm still learning like my childhood patterns, that I have these moments where I'm like, oh, damn, that's what that was. And then I'm just sitting with it and I'm like, that's a lot. And, you know, like I'm lucky. I mean, I'm very privileged to be in a very supportive relationship with my husband. Like, he's got really strong boundaries, but he knows who the heck I am. And he reminds me of that on a daily basis. And I feel so privileged to have that, because he'll remind me, and he doesn't force it down my throat. Actually, he waits for me to realize. And then I do. And I'm like, gosh, that's what that is. And naming it, that's what I talk about in my Substack, being able to name what those are. And it's a lifelong process, and that's so exciting. Like where I'm at nearly 30, what am I going to be like nearly 40? Like it's so fascinating what epiphanies I'll have. Like if you learn that the journey, including understanding shame, is all part of it, and embracing it becomes a bit exciting to age. Like I find it that way, because you just think, what else is there to know about myself? And you're not going to just wake up from extreme trauma in childhood and trauma later on in adult life and just be okay. There are going to be patterns, and even people with okay childhoods, you pick things up and it molds your nervous system, but you can take charge of that and rewire it. That's what I find so empowering, and I've done that and I love it.
Absolutely. There's so much I would love to ask you about all of this, but essentially what I think I'm seeing as a through line now is you are doing something that is very courageous for a writer who has I'm going to say an improvisational background, that you know your material, you're in the moment, and you know that what makes it great is to be off script, to be right there, to know your stuff, but it's not pre-recorded, it's all going out there. You've recognized the hurdle of proper writing being a thing in your head, and knowing that now, proper writing is not a thing. Authenticity on the page is a thing. I think there are probably a lot of people listening to this who also are struggling with the idea of proper writers ... or proper writing ... What would you say to somebody who does have stories that they do want to get into the world, that they do know the world could benefit from? What would you say to those people?
Just start. I think, and don't just write whatever comes to your head. That's what you taught me, basically, Rachel. And like that, and and don't, like, for me, it was even like analogies. I read these beautiful analogies, and I make analogies, similes, but they're ones like from TV programs, and like things that for me that make sense, but for others it can be these like really beautiful elongated one, but that isn't me. And so trying to be that isn't helpful. Starting from what comes to your mind, you will find that it flows when you're being yourself way more than if you're trying to be like other authors. And that's not to say you can't take inspiration. If you're then getting imposter syndrome, like, oh, if I'm not like that, I'm not good enough, that's not helpful. And to be able to rein that in, that's where having a coach is so helpful, because I do get those limiting voices, and I think I will forever. And being able to just start and just write a sentence as you would speak it, like, that's the biggest journey for me. Is I love speaking, and when I write just like I speak, that's the best Lucy Barnes there is, or Lucy Kate Barnes that there is. But when I start to think Lucy Barnes has to be a writer, or Lucy Barnes has to be a barrister, and I have to do whatever those people, I'm lost. So that's been the most helpful thing for me in showing up as who I am.
This is why I love the phrase showing up, because that's what it is. It's being able to see yourself on the page. With, and grammar and spelling and all of those things, they are tools in order to more clearly get a story out of one head and to another. But that if people are worried about things like that, they don't need to be. They need to get what is them. We can tidy up. We can get help with the stuff that we struggle with. It's nobody is living in a vacuum.
No, absolutely. No one's perfect. But it'd be a bit. My husband said, like, it'd be a bit weird if I like published that was like really extremely poetic, and like, he's like, because then people will talk and interview you and be like, huh? this isn't her. The
thing is, I would actually quibble with that, because when I talk to you, my understanding of what poetic means is that there is a natural rhythm to it. It's got its voice, it's got its momentum. I think talking like to you is full of
like
that.
Keats and like old school, like ye old language. That's
right.
what I mean.
Okay.
Like Shakespearean. Poeticness is different. Like hip hop is poetry.
I'm going to defend what poetic is, and I do absolutely very strongly feel that you have every right to that, particularly in the ways that we've described, that you're up there and you're doing all of that. We have also talked about the fact that we are fellow dyspraxics.
Woo.
And I'm just going to throw in a quick little dyspraxia story, and then I have a question about that, which I think I've told you this story. So when I worked at a newspaper that will remain anonymous, somebody I knew there when I was struggling with everything, because I was 25 and that is what was going on. He had two invisible things of his own, alcoholism and depression. And he said he did not believe in my invisible thing, dyspraxia. He didn't think that was a real thing. And what I learned from that is that empathy is also invisible and a real thing. And having the faith to go, my life experience is not all encompassing, that it may be different for somebody else. That is also a real thing. I am throwing that in just because people don't always know quite what dyspraxia is, because it's not maybe as famous. Do you want to have a little chat about how dyspraxia, ADHD affect your writing, and how you work with that?
Absolutely. And I'm so sorry that anyone tried to make you invisible in any way. That's not the space that Rachel shows up in, quite frankly. So shame to him. Yeah, exactly. No, but to be fair,
I don't think he realised quite how much of an effect he has. But that's absolutely what people as adults talking to younger adults don't always realise.
No, absolutely. But nobody puts baby in a corner.
Right.
That's the thing about making
not forever anyway.
No, not forever. At the time, these voices can seep in, but eventually we'll reclaim them. But no, I think the difficulty with dyspraxia is people think it's just being clumsy, and that is actually a stigma, I would say, because actually dyspraxia profoundly impacts my day-to-day life. Some people have dyspraxia to the degree they require occupational therapy or other forms of sort of therapeutic
Can you
support.
give us examples of your daily life?
So I struggle with so I read a book actually called, and the title is literally called Stumbling Through Space and Time. And why I bring that up, and it's a really, really beautiful book on dyspraxia specifically, and I think that is the perfect summary of dyspraxia. I don't have an internal sense of time and space at all, and I've tried my whole life to build workarounds around that, and I still find that even if I give myself an hour, I somehow don't have the same rhythm to understand that. And my husband finds it really endearing. So if I say, oh, let me take 20 minutes to get there, he's like, let's double that and see how far we get. Because I feel like in my mind, I can't sense time, and I can't, and I have also no spatial awareness. So I harm myself a lot by bumping into stuff. So that is a clumsiness, so to speak, but it's not the clumsiness. It's not the part of my brain that registers spatial awareness simply is not there. It doesn't exist. I can't understand verbal instructions. So that can make things really difficult for me. And I have to kind of find ways to translate things in my own way. I read differently to some people. I read words differently. So I jumble them up, and now I make up words, which my husband loves. So I just wing that. That's some of my writing on Substack. There will be words in there that aren't actual words, but they're loosey words, so therefore they're words.
And it tends to be context driven, doesn't it?
Context driven, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So there are so many dimensions, and it's something I have to be really mindful of in my sort of way, my day-to-day life massively, because it does impact those things. Short-term memory, I'm practically Dory from Finding Nemo. I don't understand, how my short-term memory works the way it does. I'm losing stuff all the time. I've had to have workarounds again around that, creative workarounds to make sure, I'm moving it, keeping in that creator space rather than the victim space that tells me.
Let's just say that, because from the TED Talk, you reverse the drama triangle. You've got the victim at the bottom, you've got the persecutor, you've got the rescuer. Say what you did.
Yeah, well, pardon, what do you mean? As in this
say how the triangle moves.
Yes. Oh no, it moves interchangeably all the time. And
you've got the creator up here.
You have, yeah, absolutely.
And then who have you got here?
For the reverse, right? Sorry, it took my brain. There we go. There's a live action dyspraxia. It took my brain longer. And also the things I do, like the things that normal people do really easily, take me a long time. But then the really complex stuff I find really easy. But yeah, so we've got the creator
up
here. We've got the challenger persecutor. So the persecutor becomes the challenger. And then
what would be an example of the challenger?
So I work with young people, and instead of saying, why did you just do that? That's the voice of the persecutor. You would say, I hear what you're saying. Have you thought about insert, something, or a challenger would make someone, you're making someone want to be the best version of themselves, and that's in mind, but you're not trying to save them. That's the
in coaching or in improvisation, you've got the yes and.
You've got the yes and, absolutely, and you've got, I'm just going to challenge you on that. Like you say, that is fine, but it doesn't.
This is great, but I know your objective is this, and we've clarified what your objective is. So here's a step that'll take you close to your objective.
100% that, and then it's rescuer to coach, which is my favourite one, because rescuer says rescuers actually like to be needed. They really do, and it says, "Here, let me help you." Oh, what was the quote from Alan Watts I love? "Here, let me help you, or you will drown," said the monkey putting the fish safely up the tree.
Yes,
that's my favourite analogy of the rescuer role,
because we are doing it for us, not for them.
Yes, exactly, 100%. And that distinction. And dyspraxia, for example, if I was to be having a victim mindset, I would be saying, "Oh, so difficult. Like, why is my life like this and other people's aren't?" And then I would what I see sometimes happening, unfortunately, is I'll say like, oh, someone will completely miss a meeting or not respect other people's time and boundaries. And they'll be like, oh, it's because of my dyspraxia. I don't like to do that. I do make mistakes, and I profoundly apologize, because I'm still accountable, even if I want to be understood. So that's the fundamental distinction. It's not excusing my actions, but it's understanding is different to justifying.
And not staying in the space of why. We've done the why. We know the why. Exactly. We've apologized where we need to. 100%. But the what and the how is where the freedom is, where the free will is.
100%. And the lack of entitlement. So the drama triangle is the voice of entitlement. It says, I have a right to XYZ because I've been bullied, victimized, abused. If anyone ever says, I deserve or I have the right to XYZ, my instant thing in my brain is, oh, are we in the drama triangle?
So with that, going to dyspraxia and your writing life, what works for you, reminding ourselves we have the right to write our story is a whole important thing of itself. I'm wondering, is that involved, or with dyspraxia and ADHD, what are the sort of post-it notes for you of, here are the things that help me, or things I have to remember to make this work for me?
That's a really great question. So I think a part of it is the self-love of knowing I am just a chaos girly and things are going to be a little bit chaotic. I am not someone who's going to be, I need routine, but just enough routine. I don't need too much routine. And I have to have a bit of spontaneity as well. And being able to, I have like a poster on my wall that grounds me in productive things I could be doing, but they could be really small. It could just be doing the chores, like it's, or write one sentence. So that's helpful because some days I am not going to be able to be in hyper focus and write 3 chapters in a day. Other days I may. And
that's what it is for you, is it?
Yes,
it needs to be a hyper focused day.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I mean, the image in my head, because this is just how I operate, is the way on a grandfather clock, you've got the pendulum and it will go off and go, ooh, squirrel, oh, washing, but it will come back to the writing.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe for me it's a bit like that I need to personally give myself a bit of freedom, that we are doing this, but we will go and do that, and then we come back, and we will go and do that, but we will come back.
100%. And discipline looks different for different people. So within that hyper focused state, I think it's also discipline to rest. Now that's something that my brain is trying to recalibrate, because rest was like laziness for a very long time in my life, and actually I need that. Like my husband says, you are the least lazy person probably.
And you
and
I
world.
were both called lazy at school. Now I haven't actually said that to you that I was, because you've mentioned lazy in our session. I would not talk about myself in that situation, but here we are, and yes, I will. I remember not being able to focus on time enough to find things. I remember there's one instant where I remember literally I can hear her voice going, now Rachel, it's pure laziness for not finding that. And I remember wanting to express that it wasn't, but not having any kind of understanding of the vocabulary to make this teacher understand what was going on for me. And it's so interesting.
That's why words are so beautiful, and that's why writing's so beautiful, because you give people the words.
But lazy is one that you then went,
I don't know where I even got that from, because I literally, like my husband says, I'm like the least lazy person. Like, it's actually trying the opposite. It's trying to get me to sit still. That is the ongoing problem, because I'll sit down, I'll be like, but I got to do this to do. Like, I can't. I've been having to work on that in my journey. But I think it's because survival for me was movement. It was action. It was not waiting. It was not sitting still. So I would interpret anything like that as that's that inner persecutor in me, because the drama triangle could be external. It can also be within. It was saying, get up, Lucy, or you're not going to survive. Carry on, Lucy, or you're not going to survive.
So you're moving from survival behavior to thriving behavior, and survival behavior was be active, be doing stuff, be pushing forward, because otherwise shock, like you sink. But actually now, thriving behavior involves knowing I have a home, doesn't it? That's a new thing.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's still in a process of recalibration, because my nervous system is catching up. Yeah, exactly. It's still catching up, which I find beautiful. And I'm trying to move into the space. Also, big fan of Alan Watts, but he also said, we should measure our days not by degree of productivity, but by degrees of presence. And I've always found that profound. And if I'm present with my son, if I'm present with anything I'm doing, even just resting, writing, whatever it is, if I'm present, that's a much better and less toxic metric for me. And I feel so much more fulfilled, rather than chasing this kind of retreating mirage of success or happiness. I think it was Alan Watts who called it that too. You're just saying, actually, I've done enough today. I'm enough today.
I'm going to stay with this for a second, because I know there will be other dyspraxic, ADHD, neurodiverse, neurospicy, however we want to identify people like us out there.
Neurospicy all the way.
What post-it note would you want to chuck into their universe to say, remember this, or have this?
honestly, the first thing that comes to me is like, know thyself. Like, once you know what your rhythm is, and actually being a woman comes into that a lot. There's a huge intersectionality, like hormonally for me. I have to recognize that and know what your triggers are, know all of that. Then you know when you can show up and not blame yourself. That voice that says I should be doing this, and self-flagellation, that's not helpful. So when the more you know yourself, and that's lovely because you can explore it, right? You can write, oh, actually I'm learning this about myself today, and particularly like knowing what my specific challenges are and also my specific strengths has enabled me to really get a grip on how I want to measure my life and how I want to thrive going forwards, rather than trying to be, what I think in my own head I should be. So that's why knowledge of self, I think, is the most important thing.
I'm just thrilled to hear all of that, and the way that truth comes through and is useful to people because of that detail, because of that willingness to share, because of acknowledging the shame that we feel is there, but it's not an instruction. It's a fence to jump, and we know where we're going now. So that's 100%. Really beautiful. Lucy Kate Barnes, thank you so much for joining the Writers' Gym.
My honour, honestly, thank you so much. And also just thank you generally, Rachel, for, I think my own journey has supercharged since knowing you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory.